وغانما مكرما سالما منعما وغانما مكرما هل أراك في علاك تبلغ السبا موطني.
Please subscribe. A long time ago, northern Iraq was home to a Neanderthal culture, between 65,000 BC to 35,000 BC more exactly. Since 10,000 BC on today's territories of Turkey, Syria or Iraq was one of the centers of Neolithic culture, where agriculture and cattle breeding appeared for the first time in the world. The historical period in Iraq truly begins during the Uruk period. In that time, many Sumerian cities were built up. As well as in other major cultures, large rivers provided a necessary environment for growth. From this place, in the late 4000 BC, the world's first writing system and recorded history itself started. The Sumerians were the first that used the wheel and created city-states. Here we found the first records of evidence of mathematics, astronomy, astrology, law, and medicine. In the 26th century BC, it was created what was believed to be the first empire in history. Then the priest king of Umma overthrew the primacy of Lagash dynasty in the area, then conquered Uruk, making his capital, and claimed an empire extending from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Today's Iraq was the center of the Akkadian, Sumerian, Assyrian, and Babylonian empires. Sumer emerged as the civilization of Lower Mesopotamia out of the prehistoric Ubaid period. In the early Bronze Age or Uruk period, classical Sumer ends with the rise of Akkadian Empire in the 24th century BC. Babylonia was a state in Lower Mesopotamia with Babylon as its capital, and the state was based on more cultures like the Sumerians and the Akkadians. Sumerian was replaced as the spoken language of Mesopotamia somewhere around the turn of the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC. Babylonia emerged when Hammurabi unified the territories of the former kingdoms of Sumer and Akkad. Assyria was an Akkadian East Semitic kingdom in Upper Mesopotamia. It was named for its original capital, the ancient city of Assur. Assyria had a period of being an empire from the 19th to the 18th centuries BC. From the 14th to the 11th centuries BC, Assyria once more became a major power with the rise of the Middle Assyrian Empire. The Neo-Assyrian Empire was the dominant political force in the ancient Near East during the Iron Age. The Neo-Babylonian Empire marks the final period of the history of the ancient Near East before the Persian conquest. Persia became stronger and stronger, and Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. In the 6th century BC, Persia defeated the Neo-Babylonian Empire at the Battle of Opis, and Iraq was annexed to this empire for nearly 2 centuries. In the late 4th century BC, Alexander the Great conquered the region. Much of the eastern part of the empire was conquered by Parthians under Mithridates I in the mid-2nd century BC. At the beginning of the 2nd century AD, the Romans, led by Emperor Trajan, invaded Parthia and conquered Mesopotamia, making it an imperial province. Christianity reached Mesopotamia in the 1st century AD, and the Sumerian, Akkadian religions and traditions disappeared during this period. From the 3rd century AD, the Sassanid dynasty ruled Mesopotamia until the 7th century, when the Islamic invasion happened. There was an influx of Arabs in the Sassanid period. Upper Mesopotamia will be known as Al Jazeera in Arabic, which means island, speaking about the territory between the two rivers. The first conflict between the Arab tribes and the Persian forces seems to have been in 634. But they came again, and after a successful campaign, Iraq came under the Arab rule within a year. Around 636, a larger Arab Muslim force defeated the main Persian army. By the end of 638, the Muslims had conquered all of western Sassanid provinces. The city of Baghdad was built in 8th century as the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. Baghdad became the primary cultural center for the Muslim world. The 8th and the 9th centuries are called the Islamic Golden Age. After the 9th centuries, Caliphate entered in a period of decline, and parts of Iraq were ruled by some Iranian emirates. The Seljuk Empire captured Baghdad in 1055. Iraq fell under the rule of Khwarezmian dynasty in the later 11th century. The Mongols under Genghis Khan had conquered Khwarezmia by 1221, and in 1258 Baghdad was captured, marking a decline. After the division of the Mongol Empire, Iraq was a province of Ilkhanate. After the breakup of Ilkhanate in the 1330, the Jalayiride Sultanate ruled, and after that, Karakoyunlu Turkmen touched this land. Most of the territory of present-day Iraq came under the control of the Ottoman Empire as the Pashalik of Baghdad. The Ottomans ruled this territory between 1533 to 1918. Iraq would be contested between the Ottomans and Persians for more than 100 years during the frequent Ottoman-Persian wars. At the Treaty of Zuhab in 1639, most of the territory of the present-day Iraq eventually came under the control of the Ottoman Empire as the province of Baghdad. By the 17th century, the frequent conflicts with the Safavids had created instability in this province and had weakened the Ottoman control over this territory. During the 18th and the 19th centuries, Iraq was ruled by a Mamluk dynasty of Georgian origin by obtaining autonomy from the Ottomans. In this period, order was restored and a program of modernization of economy and military was introduced. In the period of the Ottoman rule, the present-day Iraq was a battle zone between different empires and tribes. Due to the conflicts that existed here for centuries, if in the ancient times we could find here somewhere around 30 million people, by the end of the 19th century just 5 million people lived here. In World War I, the Ottomans sided with the Central Powers. British forces invaded this land and suffered a major defeat against the Turkish army during the siege of Kut. Then British were further aided by the support of the local Arabs and Assyrians. They wanted to be free and not to stay under the Ottoman rule. In 1916, the British and French made a plan for the post-war division of Western Asia. An agreement and the borders of Iraq were designed. British forces captured Baghdad in 1917 and defeated the Ottomans in the end. An armistice was signed in 1918. After the First World War, Iraq became a state under the British control. The institution of slavery was abolished here in 1920s. British authorities selected Sunni Arab elites from the region for appointments in the government. Britain granted independence to the Kingdom of Iraq in 1932. On the urging of King Faisal, even with independence, the British maintained their military bases on Iraq's territory. The country was ruled by the King Ghazi after the Faisal death in 1933. Many military coups were tried until his death in 1939. After Ghazi's death, Faisal II Abdallah served as regent. During World War II, Iraqi regime of Regent Abd al-Ilah was overthrown in 1941 by the Golden Square officers headed by Rashid Ali, which caused the Iraqi Anglo War. Due to Rashid Ali's links to the Axis powers, conflict resulted in British victory. The territory of Iraq was used as a base for Allied attacks on Mandate of Syria and support for the invasion of Iran. After the Second World War, Iraq became a member of the United Nations and a founding member of the Arab League. In 1958, the army overthrew the monarchy and the new government proclaimed Iraq to be a republic and rejected the idea of a union with another Arab state. From 1960, a period of high instability existed. In 1961, Kuwait gained its independence from Great Britain and Iraq claimed this territory, and between 1961 and 1970, the Kurdish-Iraq War happened. Is there a state name, Kurdistan or something? Well, officially no. Kurdish people are living on today's territories of Turkey, Syria, Iran and Iraq. It's believed that in this area are living today more than 35 million people. So the Kurdish people revolted and the war happened. This period is marred by short civil conflicts, many military leaders and accidentally deaths of powerful men. After the war ended in 1970, the Second Kurdish War will start just after 4 years and lasted just for 1 year. In July 1979, President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr was forced to resign by Saddam Hussein. Because of the territorial disputes with Iran, a war resulted, known as the Iran-Iraqi War between 1980 and 1988. Ended with no big achievements for both sides, but with huge loss of life and billions of dollars. In August 1990, Iraq invaded and annexed Kuwait. This event led to the First Gulf War and to military intervention of the United States and other UN countries. It was believed that Iraq had chemical weapons. After the war, Iraq was ordered to destroy its chemical weapons. The country was sanctioned. Because it's believed that Iraq had failed to abandon its weapons of mass destruction program following the 9/11, on March 2003 a United States organized coalition invaded Iraq under the pretext that Iraq had failed to abandon its weapons of mass destruction program. The period from 2003 to 2011 will be known as the Iraq War. The war resulted in the execution of Saddam Hussein, the change of the government, but also in rebellions and local civil conflicts. The situation got worse. After 2011, many factions, primarily radical Sunni forces, opposed the central government of Iraq. The Islamic State invaded Iraq in 2013-2014. By 2015, Iraq was effectively divided between the government, the Kurdistan Regional Government, and the Islamic State of Iraq. The territory of this country was the battleground for many groups, ethnicities, kingdoms or empires throughout hundreds or thousands of years. Today, Iraq is a country which is trying to gain its stability back, making progress every day. A country with 5 million people in 1950, but with more than 37 million today. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. Please subscribe if you haven't already.